This is a truly cinematic and cinematographic experience and adventure. And as in my opinion, this movie was made for the theaters. And I wanted to know, are you excited to the audience to watch it in theaters with a big screen?
Yeah, I mean, what's kind of crazy is that when it came out in the States last month, and I wasn't able to go out to the States. And so some of my friends were going to see the film at the cinema, and I was like, oh, you've done something that I haven't and seen it at the cinema. Like, it's actually only recently, on the day that it came out in the States, we did like have a little screening for it in London because like some of the crew, we wanted to watch it on the big screen. And then, and then it showed in Cannes the other day, which was great. And it comes out in the UK and France at the cinema. So that's amazing. Like it's like I anybody that gets to see it at the cinema, that makes me very happy.
This is a colorful movie, but you shoot the interview in black and white. And I wanted to know why.
Well, it's two things. It's like I felt like like because the film kind of takes place in like 50 years, I wanted to make the interviews themselves quite timeless. And I also wanted to make all the interviews the same. But what also, so there was that thing of kind of making the interviews feel timeless and letting the archive tell the story of the passing of time. But also, it was supposed to be that all of the interviews looked like the cover of 1976's Big Beat, which is a Richard Avedon photo. I said to the DP, Jake Polonsky, why don't we do all the interviews and make them look like a Richard Avedon photo? So that was sort of the idea.
As a filmmaker, what was the biggest technical challenge for you?
I guess there's lots of things where it's like anytime there's something that you are doing that you haven't necessarily done before. So I guess in this, it's like I was the interviewer. So I was like interviewing everybody, like 80 people. And so, to be an interviewer, you have to kind of like research the subject. And there's other things that I directed the whole concert in London, which will be on the Blu-ray as like a special feature, like the entire like 90-minute concert. As a documentary maker, it's a different process in the way that you're trying to capture the story. So that was it was just an interesting process. So I've definitely learned a lot. And I think, if I did a second documentary, I'd come in with a bit more kind of experience of having made one and understanding the way it could work or what you could do.
Do you have any idea about a new documentary?
No.
Do you want to make something? Okay.
No, I mean, I'd like to do one, but I think the thing with Sparks is it was kind of staring me in the face in the sense of that I hadn't made plans to make a documentary, but I was a fan of the band and I was a fan of music documentaries. And I had started to say aloud to people, somebody should do a documentary about Sparks. It was actually the filmmaker, Phil Lord, who's a friend of mine and also a Sparks fan, who's the one who finally suggested it. I'd like to do another one. I need to find a subject matter that would keep me interested for 2.5 years to kind of like to do it.
Speaking of the interviews, you met a lot of people from several horizons. Um, were there any that really surprised you?
I think sort of it's sometimes when people surprise themselves is always fun. Like for example, Flea, I asked him about Sparks and he goes, those guys are legends. And he was like really kind of in awe of them. And I said, will you come and do an interview? And he said, yeah, yeah, sure. And then the sort of the morning of, he sort of texts me, goes, oh man, I suddenly realized maybe I like kind of get nervous about it. Maybe I don't know as much about Sparks that I thought I did. And I convinced him to come in. And then when he started talking, he's basically like talked for like half an hour nonstop. It was sort of extraordinary, like, and it was one of the best interviews. It's funny that there are people that like I got really starstruck by, usually like musical artists who were like when I was growing up, they were like TV stars to me. Duran Duran, Vince Clarke, Andy Bell, Nick Hayward, like those things are sort of wild. It's like, oh my God, I'm interviewing Duran Duran. Like, so those things were sort of amazing. And like, so not surprising, but I'm just thinking, oh, I feel like a 12-year-old.
Can you speak a little bit about the editing, huge editing process in that movie? Can you speak a little bit about that?
How it first started was talking about like what things we want to cut, what we'd covered in the interviews. I wanted to tell the whole story, as in, I didn't want to just concentrate on the 70s. I wanted to tell like a 50-year story. And so then you're sort of like, then the interviews are leading you in a certain direction of like, who can speak to this subject, who can speak to this subject, you know. So a lot of that kind of like answered itself in a way in terms of like the stories that had come through and the things that were really worth focusing on. So like, you know, there'd be some days where I come into the office and say, okay, I'm going to watch all of the Sparks clips from 1974. After I'd finished doing Last Night in Soho, it was only during the making of that movie that Annette was green lit and definitely happening. So as soon as I heard that, I was like, we have to go to Brussels and, record Ron and Russell, shoot Ron Russell on the set of Annette, which was actually the last bit of proper filming I did for the Sparks Brothers, and also the last time I saw Ron and Russell in person.
As a fan, how excited are you about being able to introduce the Sparks world to a new audience?
I think it's like what you would do as a friend. It's like if you were trying to get a friend into a band, you would sort of give them the context of the group. You would play them your favorite sort of albums and stuff. I mean, the great thing here is like Sparks are sort of a difficult band to get the measure of for even just one album. So I felt like, well, if I, making this film is like my sort of thing of like showing to everybody, anybody that wants to watch, like fans or people that have never heard of them before. It's exciting to me that people watching this film who've never heard of Sparks. It's like kind of sharing your love for something and being able to kind of tell that story is a gift, you know?
Are there any chance you might work or collaborate again with the Sparks on a new movie?
I mean, if it depended if it's something that kind of would work, sure. Like, I think, that I know that they have like aspirations to do other movies because over the years they've had lots of movies that didn't come together. And it's like, and it's a shame because like what I wouldn't give to have seen the Jacques Tati Sparks movie, my God. Or like, like to see the film that they would have done with Tim Burton as well, which is something that they was entirely written and they still have the demos. And what's interesting about that is that what's not in the documentary is that Tim Burton came back to the project in like as recently as like 2006 or 2008. Like he kind of returned to the idea of My the Psychic Girl because he'd seen Sparks on UK TV and was like, oh my God, I gotta get in touch with the guys. I gotta listen to that project again. So who knows? Like that movie might still happen. It's not inconceivable that Tim Burton could say, you know what? I want to do Maya the Psychic Girl.
I wanted maybe this is a personal question, but I wanted to know more about your documentary culture. What is your favorite documentary?
I really love music documentaries. I really love Julian Temple's The Filth and the Fury. That documentary is great. And I love his use of editing. I loved his use of archive. I love the way that he managed to sort of tell the story in like sort of past and present at the same time. So sort of intercutting like Johnny Rotten with like Laurence Olivier from Richard III is like sort of a masterstroke. It's like really clever. I rewatched it the other day and it's really strong. So I'd say that's my favorite music documentary.
In your career, are there any pieces of music that you've wanted to use for ages, but you not just have been able to?
Well, I think sometimes you have to keep those cards close to your chest because you don't want somebody else to beat you to it. Sometimes when you have a song that you're very like, you get quite secretive about it. And weirdly enough, like James Gunn is a friend of mine. And when I was making Baby Driver, I remember he had Guardians of the Galaxy 2 coming out. And I texted him and I said, hey, what art? I'm just curious. Can I just, and so we had a little thing where we were texting back and forth to check whether we were using the same songs or not. Sometimes it happens, you watch a film and there's a band that you have always wanted to use in a movie. Like I've always wanted to use a band from the 60s called the Monks. I've always wanted to use them in a movie. And then I remember watching Logan Lucky, the Steven Soderbergh film, and it had a song by the Monks in it. I was like, God damn it. Like, so I wanted to use the Monks. Quentin Tarantino, for example, after Reservoir Dogs, never wrote the songs into the scripts ever again. So he keeps that kind of thing secret because he doesn't want you to know he doesn't want people who read the script to know what songs might be in the movie.
Can you speak a little bit about your future projects?
Not really, because I feel like I get superstitious. Listen, if the Sparks documentary tells you anything, and this is not talking about me, it's talking about them, getting any movie made is a miracle. And just because something's been announced in the trades doesn't mean it's definitely happening immediately. And especially once you factor in a global pandemic, which sends, listen, there's one film that I will remain nameless, which I was going to make and then I didn't. And I regret doing interviews about it at the time because like there's things in print where I'm talking about it. And ever since then, I felt like don't talk about anything until it's in the can.
We live in a complex world, and this is a very complex situation for the industry. I wanted to have your point of view about that.
In what sense?
I don't know, Netflix, the theaters, HBO Max. I wanted to, where are you exactly in that process?
I feel like kind of too much oxygen is given to the idea of platforms as something that's kind of inherently sexy, whereas in reality, it's like, it's really about convenience at the end of the day. But when it comes down to it, the streamers is like, there's not really much difference between that and in the 80s being a member of a video store. It's just about like the convenience of watching the film. Listen, I have a very nice home theater setup. Like and I got really nice sound and a really big screen. But the first thing I did as soon as cinemas reopened is I went to see a film at the cinema, and it was a film that I owned at home. I could pick it off my wall right now and watch it, but I wanted to watch it at the cinema. And so nothing will beat that experience. And even within that experience, when people talk about 3D or like sort of 4DX or all those things, it's like, it's all like just kind of trappings. Really, at the end of the day, is like, does the movie engage you? Like, it's like, if anything, people say, what's the future of cinema? And I'm like, the future of cinema is the same as it was 100 years ago. Is like, is the audience engaged by the storytelling? There is nothing else to it. Most of the time, it's more the media talking things up than what the audience actually think. It's like people just want to see a good movie, and whether they watch it at the big screen when it comes out or whether they watch it at home a couple of months later, it doesn't really matter. But like, my least favorite article is on film sites where saying, and these films are leaving Netflix at the end of the month, and it's like, so what? If you love it, fucking buy it. Like, it's like no, that doesn't mean that like because Hot Fuzz is leaving Netflix at the end of March that it's going to disappear in a puff of smoke. It's like, it's there forever. Like, so I find the kind of like, there's, like too much noise made about like things that will in a couple of years seem like pretty standard. And it's like, there's no difference between like the platforms really and like video shops in the 80s or DVD in the 90s. At the end of the day, is the movie engaging, and do you want to see it on the big screen? I mean, and my answer is I do want to see great engaging films on the big screen, and I don't think that's ever going to change.